Good day to viewers across the world, and welcome to this event organized by CIO Access. I'm your keynote speaker, Sri Parthasarathi, Managing Director at Metaverse Consulting. And while you will hear a lot of speakers through the day talking about various aspects of cybersecurity, I think I wanted to set the context in terms of trust and resilience in a hyper-connected world. So before we move forward on this particular slide, let's basically decipher what essentially some of these particular thought process means. Resilience essentially what an organization does is puts a lot of effort in terms of business continuity. And if you can relate to what you call as a going concern, resilience is a term that is required to basically manage a good quality of service, a uh, seamless service that any particular organization or government can basically provide to its citizen or to an end customer. And in absence of that, there's a breakdown in terms of the trust. So when a customer comes to an organization, he has an expectation. And today, when you really look at the customers, their expectations are significantly high. So when you look at what they want, and I'll give you a classic example. Let's say you are working with the taxi service, and the taxi service essentially you call them one day on your app, they fail to come. Second day, they again fail to come when you or this one. After a point, since you have multiple choices, what happens is now whether that taxi operator did not come because of an availability of a service or the app not working, whether the network was not working or you did not have enough cabs, that essentially shows the resilience of your particular service. And because of the breakdown of resilience, what happens is there's a breakdown of trust, and which is essentially something that needs to be managed significantly. And trust essentially gets built when you offer services on a continuous basis in a seamless fashion and provide what you call as whatever is your promise, you deliver that to the customer, and that essentially builds trust. So trust and resilience are extremely important in a hyper-connected world. Now let's think about what a hyper-connected world essentially really talks about. In a everybody has heard about the world being flat. The famous terminology of world being flat. But I think today, if you look at it in terms of hyperconnectivity between in the world, in terms of open systems, in terms of social networks, ubiquitous computing systems, cloud computing, and how everything is connected, then essentially the world becomes borderless. And in this kind of a borderless world, when you have to really operate, then you have to essentially focus on a few very key principles. You have to look at your customer, you have to look at your partner network, you have to look at what are you doing in terms of integration of your enterprise, and you also have to look at what is the final promise or customer value that you're going to be delivering, and which is what I'm going to basically unfold as I basically move forward. In a hyper-connected enterprise, the key aspect is about integrating front, middle, and back. And what do you mean by front, middle, and back? What it means to all of us is the front is basically where our employees or third parties are interacting with our customers, where the services are getting rendition. Middle is basically our what you call as our back office, our operations, seamless operations, which are delivering those particular service. And then you have the back office, where essentially a lot of production and all things happening. So in a typical organization, which is manufacturing, then you're looking at front, where a customer is basically buying the product at your dealership or at your front retail sales. And then you have your middle, where essentially a lot of organization or enterprise operations are being managed. And back is essentially your factory floor, where things are being manufactured and being brought in. And that essentially means integration of the front, middle, and back. And as you look at front, middle, and back, one of the big things, and I take a key experience that Sam Walton gave to his employees. He realized very early that essentially what was important in terms of managing an enterprise was essentially that empowering employees were going to be a key, and empowering employees is going to be something that you really look at, where you're saying, how do I essentially make them partake in my journey? You can have fantastic strategies, you can have fantastic vision and all things, but if your employees who are working with you are not empowered, if they don't feel part of that particular journey that you're taking, they will not deliver that particular value or service that you're looking at, the promise to your customer. And which essentially is extremely important as you primarily look at your employees and what you can do for them, what kind of trainings you can provide them, how can you provide a better engage with them in terms of information, transparency of communication, and also essentially allowing them to make those right business decisions as they interact with your end customer. Why is a partner ecosystem important? In a hyper-connected enterprise, and everybody has realized this, that they would like to do what they are best at. But the way a hyper-connected enterprise works, today, if you take a hotel chain specifically, what does it do? It provides value services to its customers or the people who are coming into its hotel, whether it's in terms of people who want to stay at the hotel, or whether they want to use the banquet, or whether they want to essentially use any of its other services. And that is essentially what they call a seamless customer service that they want to manage. But however, in the back end, there are a whole range of things that need to be done to basically run the hotel and make it very functional, whether it's in terms of laundry, whether it's in terms of food, and the entire value chain which is supplying to the hotel, all of which essentially need to be managed very seamlessly. And today, any enterprise cannot operate without a partner ecosystem. And the reason I choose the word partner ecosystem is it's no longer a vendor ecosystem, it's a partner. And it's a question of how do you treat them and how you manage them, because they are going to be critical to your particular journey in delivering the customer experience. Intelligence. And today, I think as you look at the enterprise, very interconnected, hyper-connected enterprise, you have a touch point, as I said, front, back, middle, you have a touch point in almost every aspect. And as you look at your extended enterprise, you also have touch points in your extended enterprise. You can clearly and visibly see what your customers and what are their preferences and what are they looking at. How do you capture all of this particular intelligence? How do you understand the customer demands? How do you understand the market dynamics? And how do you understand the future, what their expectations are? And customize your services and deliver your services in a way, essentially, you wow the customer every time when it comes from when you put all of this intelligence together and do what you call as your cross-selling and your upselling to your particular customer based on the needs and requirements that they have. And try to think a step ahead. Intelligence should be used in a way where you think ahead of the customer and essentially are there when he is really looking for that particular service. Customer value is everything. And I think everybody understands that today when you look at a seamless experience, the customers expect a lot, and they expect a lot, and they have a freedom of choice. There are significant number of competitors, and in this particular hyper-connected enterprise, there is no stickiness of your customer. The only way to keep your customer with you is to provide them the right customer value, and which is going to be very important. Similar to what I said early on, where I talked to you about the taxi operator. If the taxi operator does not provide the service in terms of the taxi being available at the time, or if the operator is primarily canceling out because he wants cash instead of essentially a card, or for whatever reason, or if the quality of the cab is not that very good, then what happens is the customer has multiple choices. He's going to primarily not have that particular brand loyalty towards your particular enterprise, and he is going to basically move away. Which is where I think as you look at it, there's a unique opportunity for organization and enterprises and government to provide that particular customer value and to sort of push their services in such a way that essentially not thinking about one size fits all, but essentially making sure that every customer touch point that they have, they are customizing the value that they're providing to the customer, and they're wowing the customer every time they basically have that particular interaction. Now let's move to the word trust. A very simple word, a five-letter word that takes a long time to build, but a moment to break. And when you think about it, this applies to all of us in our day-to-day life, and it also operates between an enterprise and its customer, or a government and its citizen, or any other interaction that can basically happen. So trust is very, very important to basically build out. And it, as I said, takes a long time to build, but a moment to break, and which essentially is going to be important when you think of building brand value. How do you build trust? When you really think about, for example, there has been a recent incident where a laptop has essentially exploded when a customer was using it because the battery failed, and when you look at it, the customer essentially had a challenge in this particular area. Before I go into the safety issue, let me cover security. When you look at security, when I interact with a bank, when I interact with an organization, when I'm providing them a credit card, when I'm providing them financial information, I expect them to basically take care of security, privacy, integrity of my data so that there's no leakage of that particular data. And that way, it is important for an organization to manage and maintain that, because when security is breached, and today we are seeing challenges in terms of data theft, in terms of ransomware, all of these particular challenges which are affecting organizations. And when these basically get affected, I think there's a security breach, and that essentially is an erosion of trust. Now, coming back to the safety aspect, where I was talking about the laptop, when a laptop explodes with somebody, I think automatically what happens is there's an element of trust. So, irrespective of whether it's a laptop or any kind of product that is being shipped out to your customer, then I think it's very, very important for safety and other aspects to be tested time and again so that the product, when it's being used by the customer, is very safe. If you look at a child and you're basically providing a product for the child, then it's that much more important to basically take care of safety of that particular product, the usage and all of that, and which is where the usability testing and everything is going to be extremely important. Now let's look at the sustainable enterprise. Sustainable enterprise, sustainable planet, I think are top of mind for most organizations today. And I think today, when you look at a customer, many of the customers are expecting organizations to be very responsible in this particular area so that they are maintaining a sustainable planet, and so that we leave what we call as an enriched planet for the future generations and not essentially erode everything that is there today. So in terms of energy, in terms of how the organization manage the entire aspect of sustainability is going to be very, very important. And that essentially the transparency of communicating that particular information out there is also going to be key. Accountable. As I said, if there was a security breach in your organization, then you as an organization are accountable. You may outsource certain aspects to somebody else. As I said, you operate with a partner ecosystem. There's no moving away from that. But however, the customer expects you as an organization who they are a customer to, are primarily accountable for the services that you're providing, and also all of the promises that you're making related to security, related to safety, sustainability, and all of these particular aspects. And accountability lies with the organization which is providing the service, and it cannot, while you outsource a service, while you do that, you cannot outsource the risk. The risk is still yours, so you're still accountable for that. And it's a question of how do you manage that from an overall perspective. Challenges do happen with organizations. Breaches can happen. There can be safety issues. There can be aspects, many other, there could be a crisis. But what really matters is what is the kind of transparency that you have with your customers, your stakeholders, And essentially, which, when I say customers and stakeholders, it could be your shareholders, it could be the regulator, it could be anybody else. How do you manage the transparency with everybody to ensure that while there may have been an issue, you are owning up, you're accountable for it, and you're also transparently providing that particular information, and you're providing information as to how you're going to essentially take care of it from a going forward. Governance, I think this is key to every organization. And I think we have seen many organizations essentially collapse because of bad governance. And while they may have thought that they can possibly hide some of these particular things, but a good governance mechanism, whether it's at a board level or at the management level or essentially at the people level, I think a good governance mechanism, which also manages and maintains transparency of communication and accountability, is going to be extremely important for an organization to basically manage trust. Last but not the least, as I said, trust is a 5-letter word, which takes a long time to build, but a moment to break. All of the above principles essentially lend towards what you call as a seamless customer experience from a trust perspective. And once you establish the trust, you are on a good, nice highway to building a very strong brand. So when you think about whether it's a normal enterprise or a hyper-connected enterprise, I think you need to look at how do you build that particular trust with the customer overall from a longer term perspective, because that essentially is what makes the customer that much more loyal, and ensuring that even though there were challenges, you manage that extremely well and you build that particular trust across the stakeholders, and they continue to be your stakeholders as they move forward. Let's briefly talk about resilience. Ability to recover from an incident or a crisis. Incidents or crises will happen. It's not a question of a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. Any organization can be affected by an incident or crisis. But what most important is how prepared an organization is to face those particular incidents and to recover from those incidents or crises. And how do they really manage all of their stakeholders from a communication perspective? And how do they have their internal mechanisms to manage the entire aspect of incident and crisis? One has to look at availability. And as I said before, if you are significantly an hyper-connected enterprise where you're interacting with your particular customer through an app, then you have to ensure that the app is available 24/7. And the app is not available 24/7 just like that. There's a whole range of infrastructure. There could be cloud infrastructure. There could be the network. It's a question of how do you manage all of that from an availability perspective so that you can essentially manage it. When you look at scalability, I think scalability is extremely important because there are businesses which are seasonal. If you take a retail chain, and which essentially is advertising, come in August, essentially they're advertising that in September, October, November, December, they're going to have $1 billion sale and they are going to have all of these. But what happens is, let's say 1 billion customers actually come to their particular site, and the site is not available for them, available for the customer. So what really happens is they have lost an important opportunity, and they've also lost the trust in the customer, because the customers are now essentially trying to come and buy things, but essentially the infrastructure is not scalable enough to manage the workload or manage the significant load of customers that are coming in. Last but not the least, I think effective crisis management. How you manage in a crisis and how do you basically turn around your organization. I think every organization across the world, governments and organizations and enterprises across, have gone through this entire situation of the pandemic, which was a significant crisis. It's the question of how did they step up? How did the government of India step up? How did the government of US step up? All of them, essentially, everybody's looking at that in terms of whether it was in terms of food, whether it's in terms of health, whether it's in terms of services, all of which essentially, how did you really manage? And an organization which was hit during the pandemic, how did they basically recover? How did they take care of their employees? How did they take care of their customers? Were they essentially responsive in terms of their customers, their employees, and their stakeholders? And did they manage all of that very effectively from a crisis perspective? This, these are things which essentially totally determine what would be the resilience of an organization. So, in some summary, what you're looking at is you can build an enterprise, and in this hyper-connected world, which essentially is significantly borderless or significantly flat, but the fundamental principles of trust and resilience are going to be key when you basically look at it. The speakers later today are going to sort of unpack a lot more in terms of trust, resilience, cybersecurity, and other areas. And I'm sure you will enjoy that particular conversation. But what I wanted to do today was to set the context of trust and resilience in a hyper-connected world. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day and have wonderful virtual sessions as you primarily look at it. And look forward to speaking with you again. This is Sri Partha Sarthi signing up.